Hello and welcome back. So, if you're just now joining me, go back and watch the first couple videos because I'm going to presume that you've already seen them. In the last video, we created a function to kind of load in all of our JSON data. In this video, we're going to change this up just a little bit. We're going to pass in, we're going to return data underscore alcuin letters. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to just grab all of that information, nothing else. So now what we're going to do, now that we have the ability to load in that data, we need to create another function now to start mapping it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in, simply create a function called a map underscore data. And what we're going to do in map underscore data is we are going to, why is this not blue yet? Okay, that's why I thought so. We're going to create an object. Now, this is where we're going to start working with PyVis. So in PyVis, G, lowercase g, is how we kind of create our graph. So we're going to say G equals network, capital N, because remember, we've imported it with a capital N. G equals network. We're going to pass in a few arguments here. We're going to say height is equal to, and this is going to be, if you're familiar with HTML, this is HTML essentially right here. We're going to say height is going to be equal to 1500 px. That's just going to set the height of the map. And we're going to say width is going to be equal to 100%. In another video, as we get later on, we do more advanced things. I'm going to change this to 75% because we're going to have an options menu on the side to kind of alter the map. For right now, though, stick with a width of 100%. And then we're going to pass in another argument, and that's going to be BG. This is background color. BG color is equal to, and we're just going to set this to a really nice color I found. And let me make sure I got this. I always can't keep my numbers straight. I think I was missing one too. There we go. And then we're going to also make a font color, and we're going to set that equal to just white. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a nice clean looking graph. So now that we've got that graph made as an object, we need to start passing information to it. The information that we want to pass to it is twofold. The first thing that we want to pass is we want to create a node for every letter. So we want to create a node for each EP number. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a node for every manuscript. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to create an edge between every letter and all of its manuscripts in which it's found. So in order to do that, we need to interact with that data that we have up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, actually what we need to do is we need to pass in something. We need to pass in an argument. And down here, I'm going to create this out here. We're going to go back and create that ep data object again. And we're simply going to do ep data equals underscore data. And what that's going to do in the last video, you saw this, create that object for us right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say for letter and letter data, we need to create two objects. We need to have an ep, which is going to be the letter, and that's going to be very simply just letter. And we're going to do ep num, because as you can see down here, we're iterating through this list of dictionaries, and there's one whole dictionary right there. Ep num is the key that we want to grab, and because ep num is a list, we want to grab the first item in that list, which is going to be that single string 1. The next thing we need to do is we need to get all of these manuscripts. So these are lists as well. And while this is just one, we know from the last video that when we scroll down this list, let me go down, we'll see that some manuscripts have multiple manuscripts, or some letters are found in multiple manuscripts, like right there. So we need to get all of that information and store it as a list as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another object. We're going to store all of that manuscript data. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say for MS, so for manuscript and manuscripts, MSS, we want to do a very important thing. We want to do g.add node, and we're going to add a node of MS. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through all of those manuscripts in that list and add a node into that network map, G. We're going to do the same thing up here actually for g.add node, and we're going to add in a node ep. So add node is a function in the PyVis library. And what it allows us to do is to essentially add a node the same way we do with matplotlib and networkx, but with a single command, add a node and plot it on that object that is a graph. And so what we also need to do is we need to add an edge. So we're going to do add edge. We're going to add an edge between two things, ep and ms. The first argument is going to be the one delivering the force to the second. If you're familiar with graph theory, this is an important concept. If you're not and you don't really care, the order doesn't matter. If you are using a force-directed graph, however, this order is important. In my case, I want the ep, the letter, to be going to the manuscripts. So that's all we're going to do there. The next thing that we need to do is we need to tell our function to show us the map. We're going to pass in an algorithm in a second, but what I want to do, .html, I want to show you what this graph looks like without any algorithm passed to it first. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it's already done, and it should, helps if you actually map the data. So map data, and we're going to pass in ep data. And what that's going to do is it's going to pass in this object to this function, which is then going to be allow us to parse that data and pass all the information to PyVis. Now when we run it, it should take a little longer. There we go. And we get this great JavaScript file now loading. And as you can tell, it's a hot mess. It is going crazy. And the reason why it's going crazy is because there's no real algorithm being put on it right now. It doesn't really know how to shape everything and put everything into certain areas of the map. But we can see that the connections are actually there. So there's a couple different algorithms we can use in PyVis. I'm going to have a whole separate video on these a little later on in the series. For right now, we're going to simply be using the one that a lot of people use, and that's the Barnes-Hut algorithm. And I'm going to talk more about how you pass in algorithms, how you to your graph. For right now, just type this in. I'll explain this in a later video. I'm just showing you right now what happens when we pass in an algorithm to the map and how different it looks. This is the Barnes-Hut algorithm. It's going to look a lot cleaner. It's going to vectorize everything. Again, I'm going to explain that later. This is our map. It's starting to come to life. It looks like a hot mess. One of the things that's problematic about this graph, and one of the things we're going to be doing to it in the coming videos to make it more legible, to make it more understandable, is we can't really discern a lot of information here. It's only when we zoom in and we start reading these nodes, like we see that this is a manuscript, this is a letter. One of the things that you need to do when you're working with graphs is create different colors for different edges, different colors for different types of nodes, so that you can very easily look at a map from afar and see patterns without actually having to read the text. Another thing that is a little hard to read is the font. The font is outside of the node. In larger graphs, this becomes more difficult to read. So what we're going to be doing in the next few videos is taking this exact same graph, and we're going to start passing in more arguments to change the node color, to change the edge color, so what we can start looking at is more of a nice, pretty looking graph. And then we're going to start passing some other arguments to change the algorithm being used and to start getting a bit more fancy. But that's all for this video. If you haven't really understood everything that happened here, let me know in the comments and I'll try to explain it a little bit better. But go through, create this, and experiment with it. Don't just use this JSON file. Go through and pass in your own data. Try to create your own network maps. Just play with this for a little bit. Play with this basic function we've created and get used to the mechanics. And then move on to the next video. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.